Imagine this: a lone distress beacon drifting in the endless void, sending out an ancient signal, weak, fragmented, yet unbroken. It had been transmitting for over 10,000 years. Across the vast silence of space, where even light took millennia to travel, this signal pulsed like a ghost's whisper, echoing through the cosmos. For most civilizations, it was nothing more than cosmic noise, another forgotten remnant of a dead species. A signal in a language no longer spoken in, the galactic core, a language that once belonged to a species believed to be extinct, human, but humans were gone, wiped out millennia ago. The last records of their kind told a grim story, one of ambition, war, and ultimately annihilation. They had risen too fast, burned too bright, and in their arrogance they had challenged the great empires of the galactic core. They were destroyed for it. Their worlds were turned to ash, their fleets torn apart in battles they could never hope to win. Their very existence was scrubbed from history, their name reduced to myth and legend, and yet the signal persisted. When the Orion Syndicate's deep space probes intercepted the transmission, the analysts dismissed it as an anomaly, a repeating fragment of an ancient distress call, meaningless against the backdrop of a universe that had long since moved on. But then the translation came through, 3 simple sentences: we endure, we ascend, we reclaim. The words were chilling, not a plea for help, not the desperate cry of a dying people, a statement, a warning, and the man who first saw them, Commander Alrek Vas, felt a cold shiver crawl down his spine. He stood on the bridge of his war cruiser, the Sovereign's blade, staring at the transmission with narrowed eyes. His fingers hovered over the console as he read the words again and again, his mind racing. It was impossible. Humanity had been exterminated. The war that ended them had been waged over 10,000 years ago, before even the oldest living species in the Orion Syndicate had taken their first steps into the stars. The Council of Nine had seen to it personally. Every human world was destroyed. Every colony purged. They were erased from history. But if this transmission was real, if humans had somehow survived in the darkest corners of space, it meant the greatest mistake in galactic history was about to come back to haunt them. Vas exhaled slowly. He was no historian, but he knew the stories. The war against humanity had been unlike any before it, where most species evolved in predictable cycles, rising, expanding, then collapsing under their own weight. Humans were different. They were chaotic. They were adaptive. They never followed the expected patterns of decline. Every time they were beaten down, they found a way to rise. Again, and now, they were back. Vas turned to his crew, his voice sharp. "Run a deep spectrum scan on that transmission. I want its exact origin." His sensors officer hesitated. "Sir, it's coming from outside mapped space. The coordinates put it past the galactic rim." "Then we go beyond the rim." The Sovereign's blade accelerated into the abyss, its engines burning like a dagger cutting through the void. No known hyperlanes existed beyond the galactic boundary. Only silence, only darkness. Few who ventured past that threshold ever returned. It was believed that nothing of consequence lay beyond, only scattered rogue planets and ancient stellar remnants. And yet, the signal pulsed on, leading them deeper into the unknown. Vas stood at the viewport, watching the stars stretch and twist as his ship plunged into hyperspace. He had spent his entire career enforcing the Orion Syndicate's dominion over the lesser species of the outer sectors, but something about this felt different. This was no ordinary scouting mission. This was an expedition into a forgotten past, and a future that should never have been. The journey took 18 standard hours, and then space shifted. The Sovereign's blade dropped out of hyperspace, and for the first time in his life, Commander Vas felt fear. Because what he saw should not have been possible. A planet, orbiting a crimson star untouched by time. It was not abandoned. It was not a ruin. It was thriving. Massive black spires of metal and stone pierced the sky, stretching so high they disappeared into the clouds. The planet's surface was a labyrinth of interlocking megacities, pulsing with energy signatures far beyond anything the Syndicate had ever catalogued. Above the planet, an armada of warships hung in formation, silent, predatory, watching. Their hulls were obsidian black, etched with intricate patterns of glowing red light. Unlike the crude designs of old human warships, these were sleek, angular, and terrifyingly advanced. This was no lost colony. This was an empire. And then, the transmission came, a voice, calm, precise, and undeniably human. "You have trespassed into Dominion space. Identify yourself, or be destroyed." The channel went dead. Vass's breath caught in his throat. Humanity hadn't just survived. They had become something more, something stronger, something the galaxy was never prepared for. Silence filled the bridge of the Sovereign's blade, a silence so deep it pressed against the walls, heavy and suffocating. Commander Alrek Vass stood motionless, his breath shallow, his mind racing. His officers stared at him, waiting for his command, their faces pale with uncertainty. The transmission had been clear. "You have trespassed into Dominion space. Identify yourself, or be destroyed." Not a warning, not a request, a declaration of absolute authority. The ship's communication officer, Lieutenant Varron, swallowed hard before speaking. "Sir, what are your orders?" Vass's hands clenched into fists. His ship was one of the most advanced war cruisers in the Orion Syndicate's fleet. It had crushed rebellions, shattered fleets, and annihilated entire colonies. And yet, as he stared at the colossal warships orbiting the unknown planet, an unsettling realization settled over him. He was outmatched. Vass turned toward his tactical officer. "Scan those ships. I want full readings, weapon systems, shield frequencies, everything." The officer hesitated, his fingers hovering over the console. "Sir, their systems are encrypted. Our sensors can't penetrate their defenses." Vass's pulse quickened. That was impossible. The Syndicate's warships carried top-tier sensor technology capable of analyzing the composition of entire planetary crusts from orbit. And yet, these ships remained unreadable, cloaked in an invisible shroud of technological supremacy. The realization sent a wave of unease through him. The last time humanity was seen, they were fighting with outdated technology. They were struggling, desperate. But this was something else entirely. Vass exhaled sharply. "Open a channel." A sharp chime signaled the connection, and for a moment the void of space seemed to hold its breath. "This is Commander Alrek Vass of the Orion Syndicate," he said carefully. "We detected an ancient distress signal originating from this system. We mean no—" The voice that interrupted him was precise, devoid of emotion. "Your presence was neither invited nor permitted. The Dominion does not recognize the Orion Syndicate, nor do we entertain intrusions." Vass narrowed his eyes. "If you know who we are, then you know the Syndicate controls the outer sectors of the galactic frontier." Irrelevant." Vass stiffened. No one interrupted a Syndicate officer like that. No one dismissed the might of the most powerful military coalition in the known galaxy. And yet, the voice continued, as if he were nothing more than an insect. "Your ship has exactly 60 seconds to withdraw from Dominion territory. Failure to comply will result in immediate destruction." The bridge remained eerily still. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Even the most hardened officers looked shaken. Vass forced himself to stay calm, but his mind was a storm of thoughts. These humans, if they were even still human, were not bargaining. They were not posturing like lesser civilizations did when faced with superior firepower. They were confident, and that terrified him. He turned to his helmsman. "Begin withdrawal, slowly, no sudden movements." The Sovereign's blade eased back, drifting toward the outer perimeter of the system. The Dominion warships did not pursue, nor did they acknowledge the retreat. They merely watched, silent, motionless, like predators deciding whether to strike. The moment the Syndicate ship crossed the invisible threshold of the Dominion's claimed space, the warships shifted, effortless, synchronized. They vanished. One by one, the black behemoths faded into nothingness, disappearing from Vass's scanners entirely. Not cloaked, not jumping to hyperspace, Simply gone. The ship's sensor officer let out a shaky breath. I've never seen anything like that before. Vas clenched his jaw. Neither had he. As the Sovereign's blade accelerated away, Vas retreated to his private quarters, his thoughts racing. He activated his personal data archive, searching for any trace of knowledge about humanity before their extinction. What he found was fragmented, classified documents, redacted battle reports, remnants of old war footage. And then, a single unsealed file, a recorded transmission from the last human colony before the purge. Vas activated the playback. The screen flickered, and a grainy image appeared. An old, tattered command center, lights flickering, sparks falling from a damaged ceiling. A man stood in the center. His uniform was scorched, his face bloodied, but his eyes, they burned with defiance. He spoke in a language long dead. The Syndicate's onboard AI translated, "You think this is the end?" The man's voice was steady, unshaken despite the destruction around him. "You think wiping out our colonies will make you safe? No, you don't understand what we are." A massive explosion rocked the background. The man didn't flinch. "You can burn our worlds, crush our fleets, hunt us to the edges of the void. It won't matter, because we are something you've never encountered before." He took a slow breath. "We adapt." The screen cut to static. Vas stared at the display, heart pounding. Had the Council of Nine known? Had they suspected that some remnant of humanity would escape? Had they tried to erase the truth before it could surface? He took another breath. There was only one way to find out. The Orion Syndicate could not afford to ignore this. If the Dominion was as powerful as it seemed, if humans had truly evolved beyond their past weaknesses, then the balance of power in the galaxy was about to shift. Vas issued a command to his AI assistant. "Prepare a full report. Send it to High Command with maximum priority." As the ship surged forward into hyperspace, Vas made a decision. He had to return. He had to know what the Dominion was, what humanity had become. And if they were a threat, the foe. Galaxy needed to be prepared. The Sovereign's blade carved through hyperspace, its engines humming with quiet urgency. Commander Alrek Vas sat in his dimly lit quarters, eyes locked on the screen in front of him, replaying the old human transmission. Over and over again, "We adapt." That single phrase reverberated through his mind like a pulse, echoing through every shred of logic he tried to cling to. Humans had been wiped out, annihilated. The Orion Syndicate had burned their worlds, shattered their fleets, erased their very existence from history. And yet, here they were. Not just alive, but powerful. More powerful than anything he had ever encountered. His mind struggled to piece together the impossible. How had they survived? More importantly, how had they evolved into what he had just witnessed? The answer lay within the Dominion. The ship AI chimed, pulling Vas from his thoughts. Incoming transmission from High Command. He straightened. This was what he had been waiting for. With a swipe of his hand, the screen flickered, revealing the cold, hardened features of Strategos Ilaran, one of the highest-ranking officials of the Orion Syndicate's War Council. Her gaze was sharp, unreadable. "Commander Vas, your report was received." Vas took a breath, steadying himself. "Then you understand the gravity of what we've found." She didn't blink. "What you found is a phantom, an anomaly from a war that ended 10,000 years ago." Vas clenched his jaw. "No, Strategos, this is not an anomaly. This is a superpower lying in wait. The Dominion is real, and if we don't act, the Syndicate, no, the entire galaxy, will face something beyond our comprehension." For the first time, Ilaran hesitated. "Your scans failed to penetrate their defenses?" "Yes, and their ships, more advanced than anything in known space." The Strategos exhaled slowly, leaning forward. "Do you understand what you are implying, Vas? That a species eradicated over 10,000 years ago has somehow become a civilization powerful enough to rival us?" "That is impossible." Vas shook his head. "Strategos, I watched them, I spoke to them. These humans have technology we cannot even see, let alone counter. They did not run. They did not negotiate. They dictated terms to us. To us, the Orion Syndicate." Ilaren's expression darkened. "We cannot let this stand." There it was. The reaction Vas had expected, the natural response of the most dominant war machine in the galaxy when faced with an unknown threat. "You want to destroy them," he said flatly. Ilaren's lips pressed together. "If what you say is true, then we have no choice. We cannot allow a forgotten remnant of humanity to disrupt the galactic order. If they have rebuilt in isolation, then we will remind them of their place. We will finish what was started." Vas felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen the Dominion's ships, their formations, their calculated precision. If the Orion Syndicate thought they could simply erase humanity again, they were walking into something they could not control. But High Command would not listen. They never did. The transmission ended, and Vas knew his orders had already been decided. The Syndicate was preparing for war, and in the pit of his stomach he knew they were making a mistake. 3 months later, the first Orion Armada, a fleet of 500 warships, emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Dominion space. It was the largest military operation mounted in the last 2,000 years. Dreadnoughts, cruisers, assault carriers, each bristling with enough firepower to reduce entire planets to dust. At the heart of the fleet, aboard the flagship Eternal Sovereign, Strategos Ilaren stood at the command dais, watching as the Dominion world appeared on the main screen. It was exactly as Vas had described: monolithic black spires, mega-cities stretching across the planet's surface, an eerie, unnatural stillness in the void, and above it all, the Dominion's fleet. Ilaren narrowed her eyes. There were only 100 ships. She almost laughed. Pathetic. The Syndicate's fleet outnumbered them 5-1. The battle would be over within the hour. She turned to her officers. "Transmit a single message," her communications officer nodded. "Message ready." Ilaren's voice was cold. Surrender. Silence. And then a response. A single word. "No," and... Before the Syndicate could react, the Dominion moved. The first strike was not seen, it was felt. The Dominion's warships didn't fire conventional weapons. There were no missile trails, no laser fire. Instead, entire Syndicate warships collapsed into themselves, their hulls crumpling like paper as unseen forces crushed them into singularities. The flagship Judicator was the first to go. One moment. It was there the next. It was nothing more than a twisting black void imploding in absolute silence. Panic erupted across the Syndicate fleet. "What was that?" "Shields can't stop it. They're ripping holes in space." The Dominion's ships moved through the chaos like specters, slipping between the broken remains of the Syndicate's once mighty fleet. And then the transmissions began. A voice. Ancient, powerful, calm. "You should have left us alone." One by one, Syndicate warships fell, unable to fight an enemy they couldn't even understand. Their weapons were useless. Their technology was obsolete. This was not a war. It was a reckoning. Strategos Ilaren, once the most feared military mind in the Syndicate, stood frozen on the bridge of the Eternal Sovereign, watching her fleet die. For the first time in her life, she knew fear. The final transmission from the Dominion came through. "We endured. We ascended. Now we reclaim." And in that moment, Ilaren understood the truth. The Syndicate had not found a remnant of humanity. They had found something beyond, human. Something that had transcended flesh and time, reshaped by the void, by the cruelty of history. Something that had not forgotten. Something that had been waiting. Humanity had returned, and they had already won. What would you do if the most dangerous species in the universe wasn't extinct after all? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you want more stories like this, like, share, and subscribe to XenoChronicles. This is only the beginning.